The unbreakable bond begins. Violet Harper had always dreamed of being a mother. Ever since she was a young girl, she imagined holding tiny hands, whispering bedtime stories, and watching the magic of childhood unfold before her eyes. But life had other plans. After years of struggling with infertility, countless doctor visits, and the pain of shattered hope, Violet made a decision that would change her life forever: adoption. It wasn't an easy road. The adoption process was rigorous, filled with paperwork, interviews, and deep emotional evaluations. But Violet didn't waver. She knew her heart had more than enough love to give. One crisp autumn morning, she received a call from the adoption agency. Her heart pounded as she listened to the voice on the other end of the line. "Miss Harper, we have a situation." The social worker, Elaine, said cautiously. "A situation?" Violet asked, gripping her phone tighter. "A pair of newborn twins were abandoned at the hospital. They need a home immediately. Would you be willing to meet them?" Tears welled up in Violet's eyes. Twins. She had never considered the possibility of raising two babies at once. Could she do it? Was she ready? 1,000 thoughts swirled in her mind, but in the midst of them, a single, undeniable truth emerged. She already loved them. "Yes," she whispered. "I want to meet them." A love born in an instant. When Violet arrived at the hospital, she was led into a quiet, sterile room where two tiny infants lay in bassinets, swaddled in soft blankets. A nurse smiled at her and gently picked up the first baby, placing him in Violet's arms. "This is Ethan," the nurse said warmly. The moment she held him, a warmth spread through her entire being. His little fingers curled around hers, and tears streamed down her cheeks. She was his mother. Then she was handed the second baby. "And this is Emma." Emma was smaller, more fragile, but her eyes, oh, her eyes, were filled with a quiet strength that took Violet's breath away. As she held both of them close, a deep sense of purpose settled in her soul. These were her children. It didn't matter where they had come from or why they had been abandoned. From that moment on, she would love them fiercely and unconditionally. The hospital's social worker sat down beside her. They were left with no information, no history. "We don't know who their biological parents are." Violet looked down at the tiny faces nestled against her. It didn't matter. "They have a mother now," she said softly, pressing gentle kisses to their foreheads. The journey of motherhood. Raising twins alone was no easy feat. There were sleepless nights, endless diapers, and moments of sheer exhaustion that made Violet question if she was strong enough for the task. But for every challenge, there was a reward. Ethan's first laugh, Emma's first steps, the way they clung to her when they were scared. They became her entire world. As the years passed, Violet worked tirelessly to provide for them. She balanced 2 jobs, often coming home late at night, only to wake up before dawn to prepare them for school. She sacrificed everything: her dreams, her personal life, even her own comfort, to ensure they had everything they needed. And in return, Ethan and Emma flourished. Ethan was the adventurous one, always seeking new challenges, pushing limits, and never backing down. Emma, on the other hand, was more introspective, a quiet thinker with a heart full of compassion. They were different in many ways, but they shared one undeniable truth: they adored their mother. No matter how difficult life became, the 3 of them faced it together. They were a team, an unbreakable bond formed not by blood, but by love. A whisper of the past. One evening, when the twins were around 10 years old, Violet found Emma sitting by the window, staring at the sky. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" Violet asked, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. Emma hesitated before speaking. "Mom, do you ever think about where we came from?" The question sent a jolt through Violet's heart. She had always known this moment would come, but she wasn't prepared for it. "I think about it sometimes," Violet admitted honestly. "But what matters most is where we are now. We're a family, and that's all that truly matters." Emma nodded, But Violet saw the curiosity lingering in her eyes. Ethan, on the other hand, never asked. He was content with the life he had, never feeling the need to look beyond what he already knew. But Violet knew that as they grew older, the questions would only get stronger. She just hoped, prayed, that when the time came, the truth wouldn't shatter the family she had fought so hard to build. The promise of forever. On their 18th birthday, Violet threw the twins a grand celebration. Family, friends, and neighbors gathered to honor the two incredible individuals they had become. As she watched them laugh and dance, she felt an overwhelming sense of pride. She had done it. Despite every obstacle, she had raised two kind, strong, and extraordinary young adults. But as the night drew to a close, something shifted. Emma pulled Violet aside, her hands trembling. "Mom," she said hesitantly, "I need to talk to you." Violet's heart pounded. "Of course, sweetheart. What's wrong?" Emma took a deep breath. "Ethan and we found something about our past." The words hit Violet like a freight train. Her greatest fear had arrived. She braced herself as Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, tattered envelope. "Mom, we found this, and it changes everything." The letter that changed everything. Violet stared at the tattered envelope in Emma's trembling hands. The air around them felt heavier, as if the weight of the past had suddenly settled onto their shoulders. She could hear the muffled laughter of party guests in the background, but in this moment, everything else faded away. "What is this?" Violet finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Emma hesitated, exchanging a nervous glance with Ethan, who stood beside her with an unreadable expression. "We found it a few weeks ago," Emma said softly. "It was in a box in the attic. We didn't open it yet. We wanted to wait until tonight." Violet's breath caught in her throat. A box in the attic. She had stored away old things over the years. Baby clothes, photo albums, trinkets from their childhood. But she didn't remember any envelope. "Mom," Ethan finally spoke, his voice steady. "Do you know what's inside?" Violet shook her head slowly, though deep down, something inside her twisted with unease. She had a feeling that whatever was in that letter would change everything. Emma handed it to her. Violet hesitated before taking it, running her fingers over the fragile paper. It was old, much older than she expected. The edges were worn, the ink slightly faded. And then she saw the handwriting on the front. It wasn't hers. It wasn't from the adoption agency, either. The name written in flowing, cursive letters made her heart skip a beat. For Ethan and Emma. She swallowed hard. Who had written this? And why had it been hidden for so long? Unraveling the past. With trembling hands, Violet carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a folded piece of paper, delicate with age. As she unfolded it, her eyes scanned the words that made her blood run cold. "To my precious children, if you're reading this, it means you have grown. I wish I could have been there to see it." Violet's vision blurred as she continued reading. "There is so much you don't know about where you come from. So much I never wanted you to suffer from. But I never abandoned you. I only wanted to protect you. Please, believe that. One day, you will understand why I had to let you go. Love always. Your mother." Silence. The world around them stood still. Violet's hands shook as she lowered the letter. Emma's eyes were wide with shock, while Ethan clenched his fists at his sides. "Our mother wrote this," Emma whispered, her voice cracking. Violet felt her throat tighten. "But I was told you were abandoned," she murmured. "The adoption agency said there was no information about your birth parents." Ethan stepped forward, his expression hard. "Then they lied." Violet's heart clenched painfully. She had always known the twins might one day want to know about their origins. She had prepared herself for that. But nothing could have prepared her for this, for the idea that their birth mother had left them with a secret. Why would she say she never abandoned them? Why would she claim she had to protect them? And most importantly, What had she been protecting them from? A fractured truth. The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in around them. Ethan was the first to break the silence. "We need to find out the truth." Emma nodded, looking at Violet with desperate eyes. "Mom, please, help us find her." Violet's heart twisted. Help them. She wanted to. She wanted nothing more than to give them the answers they deserved. But what if those answers led them to pain? What if their past was filled with things better left undiscovered? She had always promised to protect them. But now, she wasn't sure if the best way to protect them was to hold on to the past or let it go. "Are you sure?" she finally asked, her voice barely audible. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Yes." Emma squeezed her mother's hand. "We love you, Mom, no matter what we find. You are our mother. That will never change." Violet felt a lump rise in her throat. But what if what they found changed everything? She took a deep breath and nodded. "Then we start tomorrow. The search begins." The next morning, Violet sat at her desk, staring at the adoption paperwork she had kept locked away for 18 years. The papers listed no biological parents, only an adoption case number and the name of the hospital where they had been left. She sighed, running her hands through her hair. This wouldn't be easy. But then, Emma called out from the living room. "Mom, I found something." Violet rushed over. Emma had her laptop open, a webpage displayed on the screen. "The hospital where we were born. It closed down years ago. But look at this." She pointed at an old article. "Mysterious disappearance of two infants SPARKs. Police investigation." Violet's breath caught. What? She skimmed through the article. 18 years ago, two newborn twins were reported missing from St. Mary's Hospital under unexplained circumstances. The hospital initially denied any wrongdoing, but sources later confirmed that records of their birth had been tampered with. No suspects were ever arrested, and the case went cold. Violet's blood turned to ice. Tampered records. A missing persons investigation. This wasn't just a case of abandonment. This was something else entirely. A hidden past. A dangerous truth. Ethan clenched his fists. "We weren't abandoned. We were taken." Emma's hands trembled. But why? Who would take us? And what happened to our real mother? Violet felt her knees weaken. She had spent 18 years believing she had rescued two abandoned children. But the truth was far more chilling. Someone had wanted them gone. Someone had erased their past. And now, they were about to uncover secrets that had been buried for nearly 2 decades. Secrets that someone might not want them to find. Violet took a deep breath, wrapping her arms around Ethan and Emma. "No matter what we find," she whispered, "we face this together." The twins nodded, but Violet couldn't shake the feeling creeping into her heart. What if finding the truth put them in danger? Because if someone had gone through so much trouble to hide the past, what would they do to keep it buried? The shadows of the past. The weight of the revelation pressed down on Violet like a storm cloud that refused to break. Ethan and Emma hadn't been abandoned. They had been taken. But by whom? And why had someone gone to such extreme lengths to erase their past? As she sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of old papers and adoption records, she felt the gravity of her children's uncertain past. The twins sat across from her, their faces a mixture of determination and fear. "We need to find someone who worked at that hospital," Ethan said, breaking the silence. Emma nodded. If there was an investigation, someone must remember something. Violet hesitated. Did she really want to do this? Every instinct screamed at her to protect them, to shield them from whatever ugly truths lay hidden. But she knew they deserved to know who they were. Taking a deep breath, she picked up the article Emma had found about the hospital's closure. One name stood out: Dr. Helen Grayson. She was the head nurse at St. Mary's, Violet murmured. If anyone knows what happened, it's her. But as they searched online, a chilling truth emerged. Helen Grayson had vanished 16 years ago. No trace, no explanation. And worst of all, she had disappeared the same year Violet adopted Ethan and Emma. A stranger in the dark. The discovery sent a cold shiver down Violet's spine. If Helen had known something about the twins, was her disappearance connected to them? Or worse, was she silenced? Ethan clenched his jaw. We have to find out where she went. Emma typed feverishly, searching through old news reports and missing persons cases. After several minutes, she gasped, "Mom, look at this." She turned the laptop around. It was a photo, grainy and low quality, taken from a security camera outside a rundown gas station. The caption read, "Possible sighting of missing nurse Helen Grayson, 2010. But Violet's eyes weren't on the woman in the image. They were on the man standing next to her. Because even through the blurry pixels, she recognized him. He was the same man who had processed Ethan and Emma's adoption. Her breath hitched. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone had orchestrated this. Someone had planned it. And now, they were going to find out who. Following the trail. The gas station in the photo was in a remote town 2 hours away. Violet knew it was a long shot, but it was the only lead they had. The next morning, they got into the car, hearts pounding with anticipation and fear. The drive was eerily quiet, each of them lost in their own thoughts. As they pulled into the dusty parking lot of the gas station, Ethan was the first to step out. He scanned the area, his body tense. It felt off. The store was still there, but it looked like time had forgotten it. Dust-covered windows, a flickering neon sign, and an old man behind the counter who barely glanced up as they walked in. Violet approached the counter, clearing her throat. "Excuse me, we're looking for information about someone who may have passed through here years ago. A woman named Helen Grayson." The man's wrinkled face twitched slightly. For a split second, Violet thought she saw something. Recognition. Fear. Then he shook his head. "Don't know her." But Emma wasn't convinced. "Sir, please. She was a nurse. There was a missing persons report about her." The man's jaw tightened. "I said, I don't know her." He turned away, pretending to count change. Violet's stomach twisted. He was lying. Just as they turned to leave, a soft voice called out, "Wait." They spun around. An old woman, frail and small, was standing by the doorway. "I remember her." Violet's breath caught. She was running from someone, the woman whispered, and she was terrified. The warning. The woman led them outside, away from the gas station, speaking in hushed tones. "I don't know much," she admitted, "but I remember her face. She came here one night, years ago." She was shaking, kept looking over her shoulder. Violet's heart pounded. Did she say who she was running from? The woman nodded slowly. She said someone had taken 2 babies, and she knew the truth about it. Emma's breath hitched. Ethan's fists clenched. Did she say where she was going? Violet pressed. The woman hesitated, then shook her head. She didn't trust anyone. She just kept saying she had to disappear before they found her. Violet's stomach churned. They. Who were they? The woman reached into her pocket and pulled out an old, crumpled business card. She left this behind. Violet took it and read the faded print. Dr. Peter Langston, St. Mary's Hospital, Neonatal Department. A doctor from the hospital where Ethan and Emma had been born. And suddenly, Violet knew. The truth wasn't lost. It had just been buried. And now, someone was watching to make sure it was never found. The watchful eyes. As they drove away from the gas station, Violet couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Ethan glanced at the rearview mirror. "Mom, that black car. It's been behind us since we left." Violet's grip on the steering wheel tightened. Emma turned pale. "Do you think?" Before she could finish her sentence, the car behind them suddenly sped up. It was coming straight for them. Violet's pulse skyrocketed. "Hold on," she shouted, slamming her foot on the gas. The tires screeched as their car lurched forward, racing down the highway. The black car kept pace, closing the distance. Ethan turned around, eyes wide. They don't want us to find the truth. The realization hit Violet like a freight train. Someone didn't just take Ethan and Emma. Someone had been watching them all along. And now, they weren't just searching for the past. They were running for their lives. The race against the shadows. The car lurched forward, tires screeching as Violet gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled determination. The black sedan behind them closed in fast, its headlights like two burning eyes locked onto them. Who were they? Why were they chasing them? Emma let out a gasp. They're trying to run us off the road. Ethan spun around in the back seat, eyes locked on the approaching vehicle. We need to lose them. Now. The highway stretched ahead, nothing but asphalt and darkness, with occasional streetlights flickering like weak beacons in the night. Violet's mind raced. She had to keep her children safe. She had to find out the truth. With a sudden swerve, she pulled the car onto a smaller side road, barely missing a road sign. The black sedan hesitated for a moment before making the turn, its tires screeching as it followed them down the deserted stretch of road. Mom, they're not backing off, Emma cried, fear lacing her voice. Violet's heart pounded. They were being hunted. She spotted a dirt path leading into the woods, narrow, uneven, and dangerous, but it was their best chance. Hold on, she shouted, yanking the wheel. The car jolted violently as it veered off the main road and onto the dirt path. Trees blurred past as the vehicle bounced over roots and potholes. The sedan hesitated at the entrance, but then followed, its engine roaring. They wouldn't stop until they were caught. Ethan clenched his jaw. We have to do something. But before they could come up with a plan, the black cars sped up, closing the gap. And then, it smashed into their back bumper. The car lurched forward, nearly sending them flying into the trees. Violet fought to keep control, gripping the wheel so tightly her hands ached. She swerved sharply, kicking up dirt and gravel, trying to make it harder for their pursuers. Emma shrieked as the sedan rammed into them again, harder this time. They're trying to force us off the road, Ethan shouted. The trees grew thicker. The road narrowed. They were running out of space. And then, ahead, through the trees, Violet saw it. A bridge. Old. Wooden. Weak. If they could cross, maybe their pursuers wouldn't risk following. Or maybe it was a dead end. Either way, it was their only choice. Brace yourselves. She floored the gas pedal. The car raced forward, the rickety bridge coming up fast. But so did the black sedan. They weren't giving up. A leap of faith. The car hit the wooden planks of the bridge, the old structure groaning beneath its weight. The sound of splintering wood echoed in the night. The sedan was right behind them. Halfway across, Violet felt it. The bridge was failing. Come on, she whispered, urging the car forward. With one final burst of speed, they launched off the bridge and onto the dirt road on the other side. And then, crack! The bridge collapsed. The black sedan skidded to a stop, its front wheels teetering on the edge before it reversed just in time. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, Ethan let out a shaky breath. That was close. Emma was shaking, clutching her seatbelt. Too close. Violet pulled over, hands trembling as she turned off the engine. She turned to her children, her voice tight. We can't stop now. We have to keep going. Because whoever was chasing them, they wouldn't stop until the truth was buried for good. The hidden file. They drove through the night, exhaustion weighing on them, until they reached a small motel on the outskirts of town. It wasn't safe, but it was all they had. Inside, the room was dimly lit, the hum of an old ceiling fan filling the silence. Violet locked the door, securing the chain latch before turning to her children. We need answers, she said, pulling out the crumpled business card from the gas station woman. Dr. Peter Langston. He had worked at Street Mary's, the hospital where Ethan and Emma had been born. If anyone knew the truth, it was him. But there was a problem. Street Mary's had burned down years ago. And Peter Langston, he was dead. Ethan clenched his fists. Every lead keeps disappearing. Emma, still shaken from the chase, rubbed her temples. We have to find something. Anything. That's when Violet remembered. Years ago, before the fire, she had requested the twins' full medical records. The hospital had refused to give them to her, but someone else had. Helen Grayson, the missing nurse. Violet had forgotten about it, but tucked away in an old box back home, she still had a file Helen had sent her anonymously. And if Helen had risked everything to send it, it had to hold the truth. The truth that should have stayed buried. The drive back home was tense. Every car that passed made them flinch. Every shadow felt like a threat. When they finally arrived, the house was eerily quiet. Too quiet. Violet rushed inside, heading straight for the attic where she kept the old records. Ethan and Emma followed closely behind, hearts pounding. She rummaged through boxes, hands shaking until she found it. A thick, yellowed folder labeled with their names. She opened it, and her breath caught. Inside were 2 birth certificates, but the names of the parents weren't blank. They weren't unknown. They were listed. And the names, they weren't strangers. Violet knew them. A chill ran down her spine. She flipped through the pages, reading rapidly. Then, at the bottom, she found it. A handwritten note from Helen Grayson. If you're reading this, it means they found me. You were never supposed to adopt them, Violet. They were never supposed to leave. They are in danger. And now so are you. The room spun around Violet. Her knees buckled. Ethan grabbed the file, scanning the pages before his eyes went wide with horror. Emma clapped a hand over her mouth, trembling. Because the truth wasn't just shocking. It was deadly. And before they could react, the front door burst open. And they weren't alone. The door swings open. The front door slammed open, the force rattling the walls. A shadowed figure stood in the doorway, tall and imposing, their silhouette outlined against the dim porch light. Violet's breath hitched. Ethan and Emma froze, their eyes wide with fear. The stranger took a step forward, boots on hardwood, a slow, deliberate sound. You shouldn't have come back. The voice was deep, controlled, but laced with something dangerous. Violet's instincts kicked in. Protect the kids, find a way out. But before she could move, the man raised a gun. A face from the past. Who are you? Ethan demanded, stepping in front of Emma. The man smirked, the dim light finally revealing his face. He was in his 50s, salt and pepper hair, a scar running down his cheek. But there was something eerily familiar about him. Violet's blood ran cold. She had seen that face before, in old photographs, in news articles. He was Benjamin Carter, the CEO of Genova Biotech, and the man at the center of the biggest missing children scandal 20 years ago. The same scandal that had involved Street Mary's Hospital. The experiment that never ended. Violet staggered back, heart pounding. This isn't possible. You disappeared years ago. Benjamin's grin widened. No, Violet, I just went underground, just like they were supposed to. He nodded toward Ethan and Emma. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. What are you talking about? Benjamin stepped forward, lowering the gun slightly but keeping his stance firm. You think you adopted abandoned twins, don't you? That's what they told you. That's what you believed. He shook his head, a dark chuckle escaping his lips. But the truth, they weren't abandoned. They were taken. Violet felt the room spinning. No, that's not true. They were found at the hospital. That hospital was one of our test sites. Benjamin cut in coldly. A front for something bigger. We were working on something revolutionary, something that could change human evolution. But there were complications. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. Complications. Benjamin's expression darkened. You. Both of you. The secret files. Ethan grabbed the yellowed folder, flipping through the pages desperately, his eyes darting over the medical reports, the signatures, the classified stamps. Then he stopped, and Violet watched in horror as his entire body went rigid. This says we were genetically altered, Ethan whispered, his voice cracking. Emma gasped. What? Benjamin nodded slowly. We called it Project Genesis. Violet felt sick. You experimented on them. Not just them, Benjamin admitted. There were others before, but they didn't survive. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. We were lab rats. Benjamin sighed, almost regretfully. Not lab rats. The future. But Violet's anger burned through her fear. You took children, helpless babies, and experimented on them like they were disposable. Benjamin's expression was eerily calm. You don't understand. What we created, what they are, is something beyond human limitations. Faster healing, enhanced cognition, resistance to disease. Ethan's stomach twisted. Then why were we abandoned? Benjamin's face darkened. Because the government shut us down. The moment they got wind of what we were doing, they erased every trace of our work, destroyed our research, killed our scientists. We barely managed to get you two out before they burned the place to the ground. Violet clenched her fists. Helen Grayson knew, didn't she? Benjamin's jaw tightened. Yes, she helped smuggle you out, but we were supposed to take you back, before you ended up with her. Emma shook her head in disbelief. You expect us to believe this? That we were part of some government experiment? Benjamin sighed, rubbing a hand down his face. You don't have to believe me. But deep down, you know you're different. You always have. Ethan and Emma exchanged a glance. Because, as much as they hated to admit it, he wasn't wrong. The choice. The room was heavy with silence. Violet tightened her grip on her children's hands. We don't care what we are. We are a family. And we're not going with you. Benjamin studied her for a long moment before exhaling sharply. You don't have a choice. Ethan stepped forward. We always have a choice. And then he lunged. With lightning reflexes, Ethan grabbed Benjamin's wrist, twisting the gun from his grip. The weapon clattered to the floor as Violet kicked it away. Benjamin's eyes widened, just for a second, before he let out a short laugh. You're stronger than I expected. Ethan's fists clenched. You have no idea. Then let's find out, Benjamin murmured. And suddenly, the lights cut out. The room was plunged into darkness. And when Violet's eyes adjusted, Benjamin was gone. The final revelation. Silence, just the sound of their heavy breathing. Ethan picked up the fallen gun, his hand shaking. He's not done with us. Violet knew that too. Emma still clutched the file to her chest. What do we do now? Violet exhaled, determination settling into her bones. We end this. We find the rest of the truth. And we stop running. Because the past wasn't done with them yet. And neither was Benjamin Carter. The final truth. The room was silent except for the ragged breathing of Violet, Ethan, and Emma. The air felt thick, charged with a tension that refused to break. Benjamin Carter was gone, but his words lingered, poisoning their minds like a slow-spreading venom. We find the rest of the truth. That was what Violet had said. But as she looked at the trembling hands of her children, no matter where they had come from, she knew the truth wasn't just something you found. It was something you fought for. And she was ready for war. A hidden code. Ethan turned the yellowed file over in his hands. His fingers traced the edges, feeling something odd. The thin lining, barely noticeable. Wait. He peeled back the top layer of the file cover, and his breath hitched. A second sheet was glued underneath. And on it, a code. What is this? Emma whispered, leaning in. It was a series of numbers, long, complicated, but oddly familiar. Violet narrowed her eyes. These look like GPS coordinates. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then that means there's still something left. A place, a final piece of the puzzle. The journey to the truth. Violet didn't hesitate. We go now. But Mom. No, but Mom. We've been in the dark for too long. I won't let that man have the upper hand. We end this tonight. And so, within minutes, they were in Violet's rusty blue pickup truck, tires screeching against the pavement as they raced toward the coordinates. The address led them miles outside the city, deep into the woods where roads turned into gravel and gravel turned into dirt. Then, suddenly, a chain-link fence, and beyond it, something massive, a facility, abandoned, overgrown with vines, but alive with secrets, a place frozen in time, the Genova Biotech Research Facility, or what was left of it. Emma shivered as they stepped past the broken gate. It looks like it's been empty for years. Ethan wasn't so sure. Places like this, they don't just shut down, they get erased. Violet's grip on her flashlight tightened. Let's move. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the scent of old paper and decayed metal filling their noses. The walls were lined with shattered glass windows and rusted laboratory equipment. Then they found it. A locked steel door at the far end of the hallway. Ethan examined the electronic keypad beside it. The screen was cracked, flickering weakly. Maybe it doesn't work anymore, Emma said. But Violet reached into her pocket, pulled out the code from the hidden file, and typed it in. Beep, 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 beep. A long pause. Then, a loud click. The door slid open. And what they saw inside changed everything. The horrifying truth. The room was pristine. Unlike the rest of the building, this lab was untouched. The walls were lined with preserved documents, flickering computer monitors, and a single cryogenic chamber in the center. But it wasn't empty. Inside the glass pod was another child, a boy, frozen, preserved, trapped in time. Emma gasped. Oh my God. Ethan took a staggered step forward. His heart pounded in his ears. The boy looked like them. Not just similar, identical. Violet's breath hitched. Triplets. She turned toward the files, her hands shaking as she flipped through them. The name on the top of the first page. Sub-GC-003. Nathaniel Carter. Ethan's fingers curled into fists. He's alive. Emma's voice cracked. We had a brother. The final confrontation. A sound from behind them. Footsteps. Violet spun around, just in time to see Benjamin Carter standing in the doorway. You weren't supposed to find this. Ethan stepped in front of his mother and sister. You lied to us. Again. Benjamin sighed. I gave you the truth. Just not all of it. You stole our lives. Emma's voice was raw with emotion. You took us from our real family, locked our brother away like some experiment. Benjamin didn't deny it. Instead, he stepped forward, placing a hand on the glass of the cryo chamber. Nathaniel was different, stronger than both of you, but unstable. The enhancements we made, they were too much. Violet's eyes burned with rage. So you froze him, just left him here. Benjamin's voice was calm. I saved him. The world wasn't ready for what he could become. Ethan's voice was dangerously low. And you think we'll just accept that? Benjamin exhaled. I think you don't have a choice. Then, the red warning lights flickered on. A robotic voice echoed through the facility. CQRATV activated. Initiating facility PURG in T-minus 5 minutes. Violet's blood ran cold. What did you do? Benjamin smiled. If I can't have the experiment, no one can. Escape or die. The alarm blared. The ground trembled. And Ethan made a choice. We're getting Nathaniel out. He rushed to the chamber's control panel, frantically pressing buttons. Emma grabbed a nearby crowbar, jamming it into the chamber's locking mechanism.